All right, so we are going to look at the Great Mosque of Djenne, and this is in Mali. It's pronounced Djenne. So this is an area where the predominant language is French because of colonization. We're looking at a mosque, which means you should be able to think back and look back through your notes and remember all of the different parts of the mosque that we've talked about. Make sure that you know those, just like you need to know the parts of a church. We're looking at a mosque that is actually in its third form, finished in 1907. Now, this is adobe, which is mud brick, and so it's built from local mud. And they'll talk about that more in the video. I want you guys to notice some things about form here. You should see all the little like spikes that are on top of the building. Those are just these kind of conical shapes made out of the mud, the adobe. On the roof here, you can actually see all these, they look like bumps. Those are holes in the roof where a terracotta lid goes over the top, and they can move those around. They can open those up to allow ventilation and light. There are 3 minarets at this mosque, and they're right here across the front. And then the bumps that are along the front, those are pieces of wood that are acting as rebar. So if you think about concrete and the fact that steel rebar runs through concrete to stabilize, then these wooden, these just giant timbers run through that mud brick in order to stabilize the structure. We're going to watch this video first.
Enchanting town of mud, the old town of Djenne. The town of Djenne sits along the Niger River in Mali in West Africa. It is a town of mud. The town's history goes back over 700 years. It thrived on the river transportation of alluvial gold and traded in leather crafts and rock salt.
Some context for you.
This is the town's meeting hall. This school teaches the Quran. 10,000 people live within a 1 square kilometer area. The highest building is the Great Mosque, which stands in the city center. It was originally built around 1300 and then rebuilt in the early 20th century. People laid sun-dried mud bricks and plastered the walls with mud. The wood posts sticking out from the wall support the building. Being close to the Sahara Desert, the area lacked building materials such as wood and stone. People learnt to build houses with the mud from the Niger River. When the mud is mixed with rice husks and straw and fermented for a month, it becomes very tough, thick, and rain-resistant. To build a house, local people first laid sun-dried mud bricks. The brick walls are covered in mud plaster. This protects the inside of the house from the heat. An old-style clay water pot keeps the water cold. Mud is also used for clothing. Here, mud is mixed with grass extract and painted on cloth. Where mud was applied, it was dyed in black. During the dry season, people make some minor repairs at the mosque. A major event is held here once a year.
It's very dangerous.
They replaster the mosque walls to cover dirt and cracks made by the wind and rain during the rainy season. Wood posts sticking out from the wall make an ideal scaffold. This is a time when the Djenne people come together, making the most of what nature has to offer. A unique way of life still exists in Djenne today.
So I know we've been talking about rituals and things that bring together the community. And one thing I want to mention, and I know you guys practiced when our first week of at-home learning, you kind of reflected on how rituals have changed, or maybe new rituals have formed during this time of quarantine. But remember that rituals bring us together. They make us do the things that we should be doing anyway. And so if you were to help a church or a temple or a mosque to be built in your community, that would likely involve your writing a check, right? Or donating online. But here we see this beautiful example of people actually coming together as a community and hands-on building, constructing this site, right? This mosque. And so that's really important. It's going to bring people together. Now, the elderly are helping, cook and provide for the workers. That's what the elderly in the community do during the crepusage. And then the people who are agile, the men who are agile, actually are the ones climbing and replastering the exterior. And then younger people can help mixing and making the mud brick. So it's really a coming together. Everyone has a role. It might be feeding the workers. It might be playing drums and kind of keeping the tempo up for the workers. But there's a role for everyone in rebuilding this mosque. So this video is interesting because it's going to talk about some of the more current struggles at Djenne. Load. I miss all of you guys, and I wish we were doing this in person. We don't have sound. That's cool. Technical difficulties.
Renowned Market Square. Everything in Djenne, from the post office to individual homes, is built with mud bricks. The town is a United Nations World Heritage Site.
This is a Djenne brick. It's a cylinder, and it's different from a normal brick.
But the heritage status has led to friction here. Homeowners resent the fact that under UN rules for heritage sites, they cannot modernize. Any remodeling, even inside their homes, must stick to the original design.
It pleases the population because the town is well known, but the owners of the houses should be able to make small changes to the interior of their houses. But the facades would stay the same.
All the buildings, and particularly the mosque, require constant upkeep. As you can see, on the upper part of the mosque courtyard walls, the plaster has washed away after just 3 or 4 rainstorms.
All around the brick, you can see the marks of hands. We do it all by hand, which means that every man who does it leaves a part of himself in the brick.
But the traditional restoration methods take money. The restoration of the Great Mosque alone is a $900,000 project funded by the Aga Khan Foundation. There is no such bounty for homeowners, and while they take pride in the tradition of these homes, they feel like they are just pieces in a museum designed to entertain tourists.
There's a sort of tension, difficulty that has to be resolved by not locking in people with the so-called traditional and authentic architecture. We have to try to find ways to evolve this architecture to bring it back to the necessities of life for the community. And do it in such a way that doesn't compromise the quality of the mud brick architecture, which is at the heart of the identity of the town of Djenne.
The town has failed to modernize in other essential ways. Djenne is drowning in garbage, open sewers run through the streets, and a rotting smell hangs over the town. Add into the mix climate change, which has lowered the river waters and lessened the quality of the mud, which in turn weakens the bricks and the buildings. The Malian government and foreign organizations are now turning their attention to Djenne's problems, trying to balance the frustration of the residents with history.
If you destroy the history that tourists come to visit, if you throw out 2,000 years of history, if you destroy all that, the city will lose its soul.
All right, so there's a kind of different take on what's happening here, and that maybe tension between those who want to preserve how things are versus those who want to modernize. Now, people have offered to rebuild this mosque, even so that it looks very similar out of concrete or out of tile, something that would last and not require this continuous upkeep. The problem with that is they would also lose their designation as the largest mud brick structure in the world. They would lose their UN, I guess, recognition and privileges for this structure, and registration as a historic site. And then there are people who just, they just really believe strongly, again, that this sets them apart. It makes them unique, and it does. And so, again, this crepissage, this replastering that they do continually and more often now with the climate change, is one thing that brings them together, right? And so that's going to be something important for them. College Board wants you guys to know that this is near the center of the city. And so not only do sacred things happen here at this site, but it's also a place for commerce, a place where vendors come together on Mondays and they have trade here and goods for sale. So this is kind of like a outdoor market as well, right outside the mosque walls. As I mentioned, the largest mud brick structure in the world. We talked about how people come together to construct this, even people outside of Djenne. Talked about the holes in the roof that allow there to be ventilation, and so for form, you'd want to talk about that kind of undulation of the facade, how it has those vertical pillars going across. It's symmetrical. It has separate places for men and women. There's an ostrich egg here, and that ostrich egg is a symbol of purity and fertility and newness, not just for Islam here, but also for the local Malian beliefs.